after driving out the Chinese, the African country's oil prices soared 300%, and now they regret it. Just last month, the Niger government asked senior executives of several Chinese companies to leave within 48 hours and seize the accounts of Chinese hotels and Chinese-operated refineries on the grounds of salary disputes. In fact, before this, China provided a lot of support and help for Niger's economic development. However, less than a week after the Chinese executives left, the price of diesel in Niger skyrocketed by 300%. Faced with this dilemma, Niger reluctantly sought negotiations with China and hoped that China would re-intervene and continue to help them. So, the question is, why did Niger drive away Chinese corporate executives? Faced with today's regret, can Niger get China's assistance again? If you like our video content, please click to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can receive all our latest video content. Now, let's get into today's topic. Niger is a typical landlocked African country with a land area of 1.26 million square kilometers, the largest among the landlocked countries in West Africa. However, despite its vast territory, Niger has a population of only more than 27 million, and its economic development is relatively lagging. According to official data in 2023, Niger's per capita GDP is only $642, which is very low by global standards and is even recognized by the United Nations as one of the least developed countries in the world. Despite Niger's worrying economic situation, it has rich natural resources, especially in minerals. Niger's uranium reserves rank 4th in the world, with proven uranium reserves of about 420,000 tons and an annual output of about 3,000 tons. In addition, Niger's oil reserves cannot be ignored, with reserves of up to 499 million tons. Judging from these data, these rich mineral resources and oil reserves should have been important support for Niger to get rid of poverty. But unfortunately, due to the lack of technology and equipment, these resources have not been effectively developed and utilized. In this case, the country's economy still relies mainly on agriculture and animal husbandry. However, since most of the country is covered by deserts, the climate is dry, and the soil quality is poor, only some drought-resistant crops can grow here, and the yield is limited. Therefore, most agricultural products need to rely on imports to meet domestic demand. Relatively speaking, Niger's animal husbandry is relatively developed, with a livestock inventory of about 30 million heads, and animal husbandry has become an important pillar of Niger's agricultural economy. However, despite the important position of animal husbandry, for most Nigerians, this has not significantly improved their quality of life. In order to change the country's poverty situation, the Niger government began to seek international assistance, hoping to use external forces to promote the country's development. However, almost no country is willing to provide free assistance to this poor and backward country, and some Western countries even proposed to station troops in Niger in exchange for providing economic assistance. Such exchange conditions make Niger's situation even more embarrassing. At this time, China proposed a plan for free assistance. What's going on? China has been an important partner of African countries over the past few decades. When China learned about the challenges faced by Niger, it did not hesitate to lend a helping hand. As we mentioned before, Niger's agricultural development faces problems such as backward irrigation technology and low agricultural production efficiency. To help solve these problems, as early as August 2004, China donated 2,090 tons of agricultural fertilizers to the Niger government to increase food production. Moreover, China has decided to provide Niger with 11,000 water pumps and spare parts to help improve the country's agricultural irrigation system. In addition to providing support in the agricultural sector, China has also assisted in the construction of a number of important infrastructure bridges, of which the General Sani Couch Bridge in Niamey, the capital of Niger, is a typical example. The main bridge of the bridge is 928 meters long, and the total length of the connected road is 2.5 kilometers. It successfully connects the densely populated Gal district in the west of Niamey with the transportation hub of Lamode. The project started in July 2018 and lasted for 3 years. It was finally successfully completed and put into use in 2021. It is worth mentioning that China also has a super large oil project that is of great significance to Niger. At least it has helped them avoid decades of detours. For the economy of the entire country, this project has undoubtedly played a decisive role. As early as 2003, some Western oil companies had conducted oil exploration in Niger, but due to the high risk and low profit of exploration, after some internal discussions, these companies decided to withdraw from Niger. In contrast, Chinese oil companies rose to the challenge and chose to sign an upstream and downstream integrated cooperation project of the Agadem oil field with the Niger government, starting a 22-year cooperation. During this period, China invested a total of about $5 billion involving several important projects, including the Agadem oil field, the Bilma oil field, the crude oil transportation pipeline from Niger to Benin, and the Zinder refinery. Under the management of Chinese enterprises, the Agadem oil field was put into production in sequence, and the proven recoverable reserves reached 324 million barrels. The daily processing capacity of the Zinder refinery is 20,000 barrels of crude oil, which completely changed Niger's original reliance on imported refined oil, enabling it to not only meet domestic demand, but also become an oil exporter. At the same time, oil prices fell sharply from about $2.50 per liter to $1. What is more worth mentioning is that the 462-kilometer long oil pipeline crosses the vast desert. The implementation of these projects has enabled Niger's oil industry chain to be fully constructed. According to official Chinese statistics, the annual output value of the upstream and downstream integrated cooperation projects of the Agadem oil field accounts for about 1/10 of Niger's GDP, and the annual tax revenue also accounts for 1/8 of the country's total tax revenue. In order to promote oil exports, Niger is also seeking investment from Chinese companies to build an oil pipeline connecting Niger and Benin in Niger. The project officially started in October 2021 and is expected to be completed in 2024. Once completed, it will become the largest infrastructure construction project since Niger's independence in 1960. By then, 90% of Niger's oil exports will rely on this pipeline. As far as I know, the pipeline will start from Kulil, Niger, and end at the port of Saimé in Benin. It is 1,980 kilometers long, of which 1,275 kilometers are located in Niger and 675 kilometers are located in Benin. There are also about 30 kilometers of submarine pipelines in Benin. The pipeline is expected to transport 90,000 barrels of oil per day. At the same time, Saimé Port will also build 3 100,000 cubic meter crude oil storage tanks, 2 2,000 cubic meter fire water tanks, and related power generation, distribution facilities, and comprehensive office buildings and other infrastructure. As far as I know, with the help of China, Niger successfully became an oil producer by the end of 2023 and gradually developed into a crude oil exporter. Every year, Niger exports more than 500,000 tons of oil, and its export revenue exceeds $1.3 billion. By 2024, China's oil projects in Niger have accounted for about 10% of Niger's GDP, while contributing 12.5% of taxes and creating more than 4,000 jobs. More importantly, these oil projects have not only had a positive impact on Niger's economy, but also brought significant improvements in people's livelihood areas, such as medical care and education. By 2025, Niger's proven crude oil reserves reached about 6 billion barrels. although the reserves are not particularly large. This resource is expected to bring Niger hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. For a country with an annual GDP of less than $20 billion, this is undoubtedly a huge fortune. According to the International Monetary Fund's forecast, Niger's economic growth rate may reach 15% or even higher in the next year, and the share of the oil industry in GDP will increase from the current 4% to 28%. In other words, it is almost impossible for Niger to get economic benefits from the oil industry without the support of China. However, surprisingly, in the context of friendly cooperation between the two sides, Niger suddenly closed the Chinese-operated refinery and expelled Chinese employees from the country. So what happened behind the scenes? According to what I understand, in 2025, the Niger government began to exclude Chinese companies on the grounds of so-called salary disputes. Niger claimed that Chinese manager salaries were 3 or 4 times that of local employees, and they did not hire enough local subcontractors as required. But is the problem really that simple? We should know that the working environment of Chinese employees in Niger is extremely difficult. The local surface temperature often reaches 50 degrees Celsius. Malaria and meningitis are rampant, and the infrastructure is almost zero. Chinese employees not only have to work in such a harsh environment, but also bring advanced technology and management experience, and are also very competitive in the international market. In contrast, the education level of local employees in Niger is generally low, and the vocational skills training system is not perfect. Naturally, they are not competitive enough in the job market, so the existence of the salary gap between the two sides is not difficult to understand. However, the Niger government's seizure of Chinese corporate assets and expulsion of Chinese employees is not simply due to salary issues. According to the information I have collected, Niger is currently facing a serious fiscal crisis. The country's foreign exchange reserves have fallen below the warning line and can only barely maintain 2 to 3 months of import demand. To make matters worse, in 2024, Niger borrowed $400 million from Chinese oil companies to alleviate its economic difficulties. Although the two sides reached an agreement to repay the loan after 1 year, when the repayment deadline came, Niger began to adopt a delaying strategy. They tried to negotiate with Chinese oil companies, demanding an increase in the oil share ratio from 15% to 30%, a requirement far beyond the normal level of the international oil industry. After several rounds of negotiations, no agreement was reached. When the Niger government found that this request could not be realized, the military government then launched an offensive against Chinese companies for various reasons, and even suddenly claimed that Chinese companies needed to pay more than $100 million in taxes, and took the opportunity to make new loan requests. After hearing these unreasonable demands, the senior executives of China Petroleum directly refused, which made the senior executives of the Niger military government lose face. After the breakdown of the negotiations, the Niger government seemed to have some dangerous ideas. Niger knows that China does not have a strong armed force in Africa, and their military government is currently supported by the Russian Wagner Group. So they felt that they had the confidence to dare to attack Chinese companies so openly. So in March 2025, the Niger government began to take a series of extreme measures, requiring the senior executives of many Chinese companies to leave within 48 hours, and sealed the accounts of Chinese hotels and Chinese-operated refineries. However, after this incident, Niger originally thought that Chinese companies would make more concessions. After all, China has invested a lot of money in Niger in the past decade. However, things did not develop as they expected. Faced with the dishonest behavior of the Niger government, China responded quickly. First, they suspended the Niger-Benin oil pipeline project and withdrew some technical personnel from the refinery, which directly cut off the military government source of foreign exchange. Then, China filed a lawsuit against Niger with an international arbitration institution based on the China-Africa Investment Protection Agreement, demanding compensation for China's economic losses. In addition, China also sought to cooperate with international organizations, such as the African Union, to use the influence of these organizations to put pressure on the Niger government to correct its unreasonable behavior. After this series of counterattacks, the Niger government was temporarily in trouble. In less than a week, oil prices soared by 300%, and Niger even urgently sought new negotiations with China. What exactly happened? As far as I know, with the withdrawal of Chinese technicians, Niger's oil production almost immediately plummeted by 70%, and the country suddenly fell into a serious fuel crisis. Those local technicians who were once hyped by the military government as being able to be self-reliant seemed completely at a loss when faced with the complex oil production equipment. They were unable to handle many operations at all, resulting in the almost complete shutdown of the entire refinery. Now, many gas stations in Niger are unable to supply oil normally. Not only has the price of gasoline on the black market soared, but there is not much to buy at all, and the supply is in short supply. For ordinary people, going to the black market to buy oil is simply a luxury, and they can't afford it at all. In order to deal with the emergency, the Niger government had to ask for help from neighboring Nigeria and urgently borrowed 300 tanker trucks of gasoline. But to be honest, this amount is simply a drop in the bucket for the nationwide oil shortage. What's worse is that about 80% of the country's electricity supply has been seriously affected. In the capital Niamey, many streets are almost dark at night. Shops can't operate normally, factories are forced to stop working, and the daily lives of ordinary residents are greatly impacted. Even cooking and lighting have become a problem. Now in Niger, the price of oil has soared outrageously. The price of diesel has risen from 60 cents per liter to $2.40, a full fourfold increase, an increase of more than 300%. As we all know, Niger is a country with a population of about 27 million and an average annual GDP of only $642. For many people, such oil prices are simply catastrophic and unaffordable. At present, the soaring oil prices have led to the proliferation of black market transactions, and a large number of unemployed workers have taken to the streets to protest. In order to maintain stability, the military government has to invest more fiscal expenditures, resulting in an increasing fiscal deficit and a worsening economic situation in the country. Judging from the current situation, Niger may have realized that the consequences of offending China are far more serious than they originally imagined. As far as I know, China's overall reputation in Africa has been very good over the past decade. Many African countries have benefited a lot from China's investment and aid, and China has indeed helped many poor countries embark on the road of development. It can be said that the entire African continent is basically China's friend. Although Niger's sudden change of face this time has indeed caused a certain degree of economic losses to China, considering that China's investment in Niger is close to $5 billion. There are huge capital, manpower, and time costs behind it, and China is unlikely to give up this market easily. However, whether China will choose to accept Niger again and continue to invest and cooperate in this country depends on Niger's attitude. So, facing Niger's regret, do you think China is willing to lend them a helping hand again? To not miss out on our future projects and news updates, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We will continue to provide you with more exciting and interesting content.